Today, the president made what are widely called unusual, perhaps unprecedented remarks in the modern era. And I'm going to show you exactly what he said and why military veterans and many other experts on a nonpartisan basis say this is one of those inflection points you need to confront. It is unusual to gather this many members of the military in peacetime. The president made this public address so everyone can see and hear what he is saying to the military. And he explicitly said this military under this Trump administration must better focus on attacking, quote, the enemy within. And as for the controversial and sometimes legally overruled use of the National Guard in America, the president rhetorically pushing past that, explaining that he views the military, which we'll show you was quite...
Hey, Adam is here. So what just happening? We are watching something right now that should send chills down the spine of every single American who believes in democracy. This isn't political theater. This isn't the usual back and forth between the White House and Capitol Hill. This is a full-blown constitutional crisis unfolding in real time, and the stakes couldn't possibly be higher.
Careful to be quiet during what are widely seen as partisan remarks, he will use the military on American cities for what he calls a training ground for a new type of war. Now, some of this may be rhetoric alone. There is always a difference when you observe and cover the government between what politicians say and what they do. If we were covering this speech for you tonight and there had not been the deployment of National Guard and other federal forces in the nation's capital, in California, and skirmishes over it in many other places, it would look different. But our job is to report to you what the president is saying and what he is doing, what he is trying to get away with, sometimes under very pitched court battles.
Donald Trump has made it crystal clear that he will not resign under any circumstances. He's declared war on Congress itself, ordering his Justice Department to investigate and indict Democratic lawmakers simply for speaking out against him. He's calling members of Congress traitors and threatening them with prosecution. And he's made it explicitly clear that he will fight any attempt to remove him with every tool at his disposal.
To politics now. One day after Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene announced those surprising plans to resign, the president is again calling his former ally a traitor.
A day after Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene announced her plans to resign, President Trump took aim at the Georgia Congresswoman.
I just disagreed with her philosophy. She started backing perhaps the worst Republican congressman in our history, this stupid person named Massey. And I said, go your own way.
The president once again called Greene a traitor in a Saturday morning social media post. Greene says she will step down in January.
This is the executive branch using federal law enforcement as a weapon against the legislative branch. This is a president threatening to imprison his political opponents for exercising their First Amendment rights. This is authoritarianism creeping into the fabric of America, and it's happening right in front of our eyes. Let me break down exactly what's happening because the situation is complex, but the implications are terrifyingly simple. Democrats in Congress are increasingly convinced that Trump is mentally unfit to serve. They point to his bizarre fixation on annexing Greenland, a fixation that seems directly tied to his personal anger over not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. They point to his erratic decision-making, his refusal to accept court rulings, his willingness to hold the government hostage. And they're now openly calling for his removal through the 25th Amendment. Senator Ed Markey has formally called for its invocation. Representatives like Yasaman Asari and Eric Swalwell have echoed that sentiment. More Democrats are joining the chorus every day, arguing that Trump is simply too dangerous to remain in office. But here's the problem. The 25th Amendment requires the vice president to initiate the process, and J.D. Vance, Trump's vice president, is absolutely loyal to him. There is zero chance Vance would ever declare Trump unfit, so that path is effectively dead on arrival. Which leaves impeachment. If Democrats can retake the House in the upcoming midterms, they have made it clear they will move immediately to impeach Trump for abuse of power, obstruction of justice, and a host of other charges. They already have a template. House Resolution 353 lays out 7 specific articles of impeachment. It's sitting there waiting for enough political will to move it forward. Trump knows this, and he's not waiting around to see what happens. In private conversations with House Republicans, he's made it clear that he views the midterms as an existential test. If Republicans hold the House, he's safe. No impeachment, no accountability. He can continue operating without constraints for the rest of his term. But if Democrats win, everything changes. They will impeach him immediately. And while conviction in the Senate is far from certain, just the process of impeachment would be damaging. It would expose his conduct. It would put Republicans in the impossible position of defending the indefensible. It would weaken him politically, even if he survives. So Trump is doing what Trump always does. He's going on the offensive. He's not waiting for Democrats to come after him. He's coming after them first. And the weapon he's using is the Justice Department. According to a Washington Post report, Trump has directed his DOJ to bring charges against 6 Democratic members of Congress, 6 sitting lawmakers targeted for federal prosecution. And what's their alleged crime? They urged military officials and others to resist any illegal orders from Trump. They said that if the president calls for something unconstitutional, people shouldn't follow along. That's it. That's the offense. Lawmakers standing up for the Constitution and reminding military officers of their duty to disobey unlawful commands. It's protected speech. It's exactly what the First Amendment exists to protect. But Trump sees it as treason. And he's using the Justice Department as his personal enforcement arm to go after anyone who dares to oppose him. Think about what this means. For the first time in American history, a sitting president is trying to criminalize political opposition. He's targeting his most outspoken critics, the lawmakers who have been at the forefront of holding him accountable, pushing for investigations, calling for impeachment. This isn't about legitimate law enforcement. This is about intimidation. This is about sending a message to every member of Congress that if you cross Donald Trump, you could face federal charges, you could face prison, your life could be destroyed. And the tactics are straight out of an authoritarian playbook. Some of these lawmakers didn't even learn they were under threat of indictment from the Justice Department directly. They found out by reading about it in the press, leaked internal discussions revealing that they were being targeted. The DOJ didn't have the courtesy to inform them. They learned their fate through media reports. That's how chaotic and corrupt this has become. Trump has been publicly calling these lawmakers traitors, suggesting they should face serious consequences. His comments are dripping with thinly veiled threats about what should happen to those he considers enemies of the state. And his supporters are listening. Some are making threats of their own, even threatening violence against these members of Congress. It's creating a terrifying atmosphere of intimidation, exactly what Trump wants. He's trying to keep Congress in a state of fear, making Democrats afraid to criticize him, afraid to investigate him, afraid to even consider impeachment. It's all about using fear and threats to maintain control. Now let's talk about the Republicans in all of this. Behind closed doors, many of them are nervous. They see what Trump is doing. They understand that using the Justice Department to go after political opponents is dangerous and unprecedented. They worry that if Trump is willing to do this to Democrats today, he could easily turn on any Republican who dares to cross him tomorrow. One vote against his agenda, one statement of criticism, and they could find themselves in the crosshairs. But publicly, they're silent. They're afraid of Trump's base. They're afraid of primary challenges. They're afraid of becoming his next target. So they say nothing, and their silence is complicity. It gives Trump the freedom to keep pushing boundaries because no one with the authority to stop him is willing to act. This is what authoritarianism looks like. It's not always dramatic coups and tanks in the streets. Sometimes it's gradual. It's a president who refuses to accept limits on his power. It's a Justice Department weaponized against political opponents. It's lawmakers too frightened to speak out. It's a public slowly accepting that this is just how things are now. But make no mistake, this is a crisis. The executive branch is supposed to be checked by the legislative branch. That's the entire design of our constitutional system. But if the president can jail lawmakers simply for criticizing him, then that check disappears. Congress becomes subordinate to the White House, And we no longer have three co-equal branches of government. We have one dominant executive, and everyone else falls in line. The specific charges being pursued are particularly chilling. The DOJ is reportedly considering charging these Democrats with inciting insubordination in the military. The argument is that by urging military officers to disobey unlawful orders, these lawmakers are undermining military discipline and endangering national security. But here's the thing. Military officers are legally required to disobey illegal orders. That's been established since the Nuremberg trials. When these lawmakers tell service members not to follow unconstitutional commands, they're not inciting insubordination. They're reminding people of their legal and moral obligations. They're upholding the rule of law, and Trump wants to criminalize that. The 6 Democrats being targeted are some of Trump's most vocal critics. They've been at the forefront of efforts to hold him accountable. They've pushed for investigations. They've called for impeachment. They've refused to stay silent. And now they're paying the price. This is clearly political retaliation, a warning shot to anyone else who might consider speaking out. The message is unmistakable. Challenge Trump and you could face federal charges. Challenge Trump and you could go to prison. Challenge Trump and your life could be destroyed. And here's the worst part. It might work. Some Democrats are already pulling back on their criticism because they're frightened. When lawmakers are afraid to speak out against a president, democracy is in serious trouble. The entire system depends on robust debate and opposition. Without it, there's no accountability. There's no check on power. There's just whatever the president wants. So where does this leave us? Trump has made it clear he won't resign. The 25th Amendment is a non-starter because Vance won't act. Impeachment depends entirely on the midterms. If Republicans hold the House, Trump is safe. He'll spend the rest of his term doing whatever he wants with no accountability. If Democrats win, they'll impeach him immediately. But even then, conviction in the Senate requires a 2/3 majority, meaning at least 17 Republicans would have to vote against him. That's a heavy lift. Republicans have shown no willingness to cross Trump, even as he tears apart democratic norms. The midterms aren't just another election. They're a referendum on whether Trump will face any accountability for his actions. They're a test of whether voters will accept a president who uses law enforcement as a weapon against his opponents. They're a decision point for the future of American democracy. If Trump wins and Republicans keep the House, he'll interpret that as a mandate. He'll feel emboldened to go even further. More indictments, more intimidation, more attacks on anyone who dares to oppose him. If Democrats win, at least there will be a fight. At least there will be hearings and investigations and a public airing of everything Trump has done. At least there will be some attempt at accountability. The courts could potentially intervene. If these indictments go forward, they'll be challenged. Judges will have to decide whether political speech urging resistance to illegal orders can be criminalized. Most constitutional experts say absolutely not. It's protected by the First Amendment. But we've seen some judges willing to go along with Trump's expansive claims of executive power. So nothing is guaranteed. If the courts won't step in and Congress won't act, then we're in uncharted territory. A president who can jail his critics with no check on his power. That's not a democracy. That's something else entirely. The bottom line is terrifyingly simple. Donald Trump has refused to resign. He's declared war on Congress. He's using the Justice Department to target his political opponents. He's creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. And so far, there's been no effective pushback. The 25th Amendment is a dead end. Impeachment depends on election results that are months away. Republicans in Congress are silent. The courts are an unknown variable. And Trump keeps pushing, keeps testing boundaries, keeps seeing how much he can get away with. This is a defining moment. What happens in the coming months will determine whether America remains a democracy or slides into something much darker. The choice is in the hands of voters, and the clock is ticking.